Okay, so good afternoon. Can you see my screen?
Yes, everything perfect.
Okay, good. I'm really very happy to be at this meeting and to greet all participants of this project, OPTIMA. And when I was invited, actually, for me, it was really interesting how we will connect really climate change and open science. But after I discovered a lot of, in fact, points of conjunction, let's say. Well, first of all, I represent here National Antarctic Scientific Center in this project, but in fact, I work as head of Applied Climatology Laboratory in Ukrainian Hydromet Institute, and most of my work on climate change actually was from this institute. And recently, I became a leading author of this sixth assessment report for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and I will say a lot about this in my coming slides. But first of all, I just want to show again, because we already saw this picture of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And this time I want just to point your attention to this 13 goal, which is named climate action. And in fact, I just want to emphasize that it's not climate change, but climate action. And what we think about this goal, so the goal 13 states that we need to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So it's recognized as one of these goals, and it is not, in fact, so it's really, I will prove that it's really very urgent, and we need to do, and we need this action. Last time I was invited many times to give lectures to different audience, and usually I start from these pictures, these stripes, and I ask my audience, what is it? And just ask, like, is it art? Well, somehow, for sure, it's art. It's color, different colors. It's from blue to reddish. But then I say that it's actually, it is change of global temperature. First one, upper panel, and this down panel is for Ukraine. So it means difference of annual temperature from period of 5180. And in this case, people say, okay, so it's science in this case. But in my opinion, actually, it's just show us crisis. Why? I will explain. So here you see a slider, and each slider goes this one by one, all the stripes. And you see how it was in this last more than 150 years, in fact. And I just want to point your attention to the slider and to see that scale goes from -0.2, but almost for 1. What it means? It means that natural variability actually usually goes to 1 to this ±0.2 degrees. So now we see 1 degree of warming, and what we see again here, we see that it goes very, very fast in these years. For Ukraine, it is not so maybe obvious as for global temperature, because we have different regional characteristics. But if we go here, so it's another art from scientists, let's say. And here we see global temperature goes, and here disintegrated this temperature over continents and over actually countries. And here we have Europe and the different countries as Ukraine, for example, here, and other European countries you will see. And now you see that you cannot see any blue colors from 80s, let's say. And the last year at this picture, it's 2019. And you see that it was the warmest year in Europe. And in Ukraine, for example, this anomaly of temperature was 2.4 degrees, in fact. So here we can just state, So it doesn't matter where you live. So this climate change is everywhere. So just to explain you, it's very clear. But how do we know all these things? Just because meteorologists were very curious and very smart enough, let's say, to understand that weather doesn't have any borders. And in order to forecast what will be next day, what we want to know, not only next day, but next week or next even month, we need to know what's going on globally, in fact. So in 1873, this International Meteorological Organization was found, but now it calls World Meteorological Organization, and it was actually established just to understand how weather works, actually, how it's formed. And this World Meteorological Organization now has a very good global observance system, as it's now called, and it includes a lot of different measurements. These measurements from ground-based measurements like surface stations, radar, different it's in ocean, because ocean covers most of our planet. It's automatic station, and it's a lot of data. It's satellite for sure. It's a lot of data, in fact. And all this data goes to special data centers. We have a few of them as meteorologists, and needs a lot of computing capacity to process this data and to do all these forecasts. And I want to say that actually meteorology was the first science needed a lot of this capacity for data. Data processing was actually developed on the request of meteorology for many years. And only recently, actually, biologists actually say they need now more capacity because they start to decode DNA. Well, then going back to this World Meteorological Organization, just to show you that it is now in this United Nations system. And another actually organization, which is named United Nations Environmental Program, they established in more than 30 years ago another organization which is named this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In fact, it was established on the request of governments because in the 70s start to appear literature about climate change and possible consequences of rising greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. And governments, they wanted to know how it will impact all our life and everything on the earth. So in this 1988, this organization was established. And then the task of this organization actually was to assess literature. In fact, to assess this peer-reviewed literature. So we already heard Tony's presentation about this peer review process. And actually, in this organization, we rely on this literature. And you see this arrow, which is growing very fast, I should say, and it's represents number of literature devoted to climate change. And during this whole period of working of this organization, already they produced 5 assessment reports. So they called assessment report because they assess literature. So they not produce new science, they just put expert judgment on this peer-reviewed literature, fully rely on all literature published across the world. And all of these reports, actually, they had very big impact on our life, I would say, in fact. So because after the first this report, this United Nations framework on climate change convention was established, then it was second report resulted in Kyoto Protocol, and then it was in third report it was stated that we need adaptation, so we cannot actually, so anyway, we will need adaptation to climate change. So climate change is real. And the fourth report actually was says that this 2 degrees limit, which over which if we go, so we will have very big consequences in our ecological system. And this report actually got Nobel Prize in 2007. And the last report and this, fifth resulted in Paris Agreement, in fact. Well, now we are in the sixth cycle where I joined this group of experts, and I will show just this picture. So we last week actually we had this meeting with over 150 actually more experts all over the globe, and we produce this now sixth assessment report, and it's a very actually interesting experience for me, and I will be happy to share my experience because last year we work fully virtually, and it was a big challenge for all of us due to these time differences, language, cultural differences, and we were learning just on the way, and we are now about to produce this new report. But in fact, I wanted just to show you these 3 reports already produced by this group, because they are very, very important for all of us, I would say. So the first report is about global warming on 1.5 degrees, and it was prepared on the request of Paris Agreement, in fact. So it was one of the points, their bullet, actually, of this agreement to ask scientists what is it possible, or what is the difference of 1.5 and 2 degrees. And in this report, actually, I was review editor, so it's another interesting role, because all work of IPCC is open for commenting, for reviewing, from experts. And when I was working for this report, for example, we had something like 7,000 or 8,000 of comments from reviewers, and I just comment that our work in progress of working group 2 just a few weeks ago got 40,000 of comments from experts, and it's a lot of work for authors to answer and to account for all of these comments. So it's indeed very open process. But what I wanted to show you, this few messages, which is maybe simple, but actually they're based on very, very solid actually science. And they are very simple from one point of view, but it just say about this urgently action we need to do. So you can read it. So every bit of warming matters. It means every 10th of degree matters. Every year, if we will postpone our action for every year, so it will cost our next generation a lot of efforts to overcome this 10th of degrees. So every choice matters. And if we go to other reports, so another report on land, so it is just to acknowledge that we live on this land. This land is our human pressure, anthropogenic impact, but we can actually change this land use, and it will be part of the solution. And if we go to ocean and cryosphere, which is more relevant to Antarctic Center, I represent actually. So it's again acknowledge that ocean, it's doesn't matter where you live, in fact, but oceans sustain us because it's a big source of food. There's under pressure too, because we can see warming of oceans up down to 2,000 meters, in fact. And actually, what again? So we need to act now. Just to show that, I guess you will see more when my colleague will represent Antarctic Center, but here it's just to summarize what we see at our Antarctic station, Academic Vernadsky. We clearly see climate change, and we see it in different ways, let's say. So we see For example, I've been at this station more than 20 years ago, and I never saw at that time some grass, but now it's actually biological research on this grass in Antarctica. So we see this melting of glaciers, we see temperature rising of 3 degrees. It's a lot. I talked about global warming of 1 degree. So just to show this temperature again for our station has the longest actually records in Antarctic Peninsula region from 1947. So we actually, based on these records, we can judge about climate change. And in this case, it just shows that most warming comes from winter temperatures. So it means that in winter we see melting of glaciers, and they cannot recover. In fact, because in winter we have much warmer temperatures now. And sure, most of us, as we saw from Ukraine, so it's my part of my work, and most of my work actually was about Ukraine. So here it's first row, it goes from observations. So it's actually change what we already experienced from past to our very recent period. And in January, this temperature, we have a very big rise of temperature. And then it's projections, in fact, so in the future, because I made it about 10 years ago, in fact. And in this case, just to show you that it's made by a special scenario, which calls stress A1B. I will not go deeply, maybe one other presentation, but just to show, to say that it's so-called balanced scenario. So it is not the worst scenario. So it just about that to the middle of the century, we will have 50% of renewable and fossil sources of energy. Well, but you see that it dramatical changes we expect with this scenario. And just to point you that we will not see, let's say, this very big changes from recent period to our current period, in fact, but we will see it to the middle of the century, just to point your attention. And if we see another temperature in the summer, you see again almost the same tendency. But if we go to precipitation, we see that the most dramatical changes just in Carpathian. We see, so we have less precipitation in annual means, but not too much differences in other seasons, let's say. But anyway, since we have so high temperature, we will have more evaporation, and it will lead to more aridity of climate, in fact, and it will proceed from south to north part of Ukraine, and it's really needs a lot of adaptation. So just to point out on this. And coming to a very different actually topic, that because actually it was research in 2018 with a previous president, let's say, because many times I've got these questions about this country. Well, but so I prefer to show that anyway. So you see almost 80% of Americans, they admit that children need to know about causes, consequences, and solution of climate change. And just to point that where they have more impact, they have more actually awareness about this. And about causes, just to show you and to confirm maybe for to those who say something that it was many times in past. So it shows that it's 800,000 years ago. It's from Antarctic again, ice cores. And it's very clear correlation between concentration of CO2 and temperature. And just to point that it's outdated, because it's now we have much more than 400 ppm of concentration of CO2. So you see that never in this history, and never in actually in history of human life, we had such levels of CO2 at the planet. And now goes again to maybe some scientific art and some open data, in fact, just to show you how it goes. So it's a website. If I go there, you will see this just, everyone can see how it proceeds. I mean, all this, I don't know why it is not, yeah. So just to point here 3 characteristics. So you have concentration, which starts from pre-industrial time, and you see how it's monotonically just rising, and here temperature for different months, just to show that it's not only annual, and our carbon budget. So it means, so if we want to stop global warming at 1.5, we have not so much actually to emit in the atmosphere. Well, and if to see other part of this let's say website, you see how it go in global. And I just want to point your attention that first goes emission, and then this emission was rising, but more dramatically start from the Second World War with industrial boom, let's say, and then concentration started to rise 20 years after. And here temperature again. So here I didn't say before, but it's natural cycles of about 60 years. And you see these cycles, 1, 2, and now we should have a third cycle. But instead we see just a rising temperature. So that's why I pointed your attention on this difference between, so now we are in natural cycle of cooling, but anyway, we see only warming. So with that, actually, I want to thank you, and sorry, I guess I'm a bit over time, but well, I hope it will